What would you do if you found a credit card that could change your life? But the only ethical choice would be to return it. The story of Emily, a 10-year-old girl living on the streets of New York with her father, David, begins with this question. She is a smart and sensitive little girl who dreams of a safe and loving home, away from the brutality of the cold, ruthless streets that surround her every day. From a young age, Emily learned from David that integrity and honesty are more valuable than any material wealth. This lesson will become crucial when she comes across a credit card belonging to a millionaire from the city. As the temptation to use the card to satisfy her hunger and need for safe shelter grows, Emily's determination to do the right thing prevails. With her heart full of love and hope, she and David find themselves on a journey that will lead them to confront family conflicts and discover the true meaning of love and fortune. Emily's story teaches us that even amid the greatest challenges, personal transformation and empathy are the keys to changing not only their lives, but the lives of everyone around them. The streets of New York City are not an easy place for a child. Chaos, loneliness, and the struggle for survival are daily routines, and every corner can hide dangers. Emily faces not only hunger and cold, but also the emotional challenges of a world that often ignores those living on the margins. She dreams of having a different life, where she can play with other children and have a home. However, reality is cruel and relentless, and the girl is forced to grow up quickly. Despite everything, the power of the relationships that Emily shares with her father, David, motivates her to keep fighting. They support each other, facing daily challenges with courage and resilience. The story unfolds, showing the strength a child can have even in such adverse circumstances. While David tries to find ways to maintain the family's dignity, Emily observes and learns about stories of courage that go beyond her own experiences, recognizing the importance of staying united and true to herself. When Emily finds the credit card, a wave of emotions washes over her. The temptation to use it to buy food or new clothes is strong, but her father's voice echoes in her mind, reminding her of the importance of doing the right thing. The decision she makes not only challenges societal expectations, but also reflects the love and values her father taught her. By returning the card, she initiates an unexpected connection with Rodrigo, the son of the millionaire Michael Reed. Rodrigo, who has always had a life full of privileges, is confronted with the harsh reality of life on the streets when he gets involved with Emily. This encounter becomes an opportunity for learning and transformation for both Rodrigo and Emily. Together, they discover the importance of empathy and friendship, even in a world that often seems divided by social classes. Through the Hearts Without Homes project that emerges from this connection, they have the chance to make a difference in the lives of many people who, like Emily, face daily struggles. As the story progresses, the challenges Emily and Rodrigo face not only test their courage, but also reveal their vulnerabilities. Emily's fight for a better future intertwines with Rodrigo's journey, who learns to appreciate the little things and understand the true meaning of wealth. The reunion with his father and the formation of meaningful bonds are exciting moments that reinforce the message that kindness always prevails. In the end, the story of Emily and Rodrigo is a powerful reminder that, even amid adversity, acts of kindness can create significant changes and illuminate the path to a better future. Empathy and human connection are essential, and every small gesture can have a profound impact on someone's life. Emily's journey is a celebration of hope, showing that even when everything seems lost, there is always room for kindness and transformation. Emily observed life on the streets of New York with a gaze that mixed innocence and wisdom. Every day was a struggle, but she always remembered her father's words, "David, honesty is our greatest wealth." When she found the credit card, a part of her wanted to use it to escape the hunger that consumed her. But instead, she decided to return it, starting a journey that would change not only her life but others as well. In the following days, Emily and David faced a series of obstacles. The biting cold of winter was approaching, and the dwindling food supply became an increasingly urgent concern. David, who had always been a protective father, began to feel the weight of the pressure. He tried to find temporary jobs, but the reality of a homeless man in New York was cruel. Doors were closing, and hope seemed to fade with each failed attempt. Emily saw the frustration in his eyes, and it distressed her. She knew her father was struggling to keep her safe, but his hopes were dwindling. It was then that Emily decided she could not stand still. She began collecting cans and empty bottles to sell at a recycling center. With every cent she managed to collect, she felt that she was contributing in some way to their survival. But the effort was exhausting, and the emotional pressure made her question her own strength. It would be easier if she could just use the card, she thought, but quickly remembered the lessons her father had taught her. The struggle for a better future was just beginning. In the meantime, Rodrigo, the millionaire's son, was facing his own dilemma. He had always had everything he wanted, but he never felt it was enough. Life in his mansion was lonely, and the pressure to be perfect made him anxious. When he learned that the credit card had been lost, he initially didn't worry. However, the idea that a child might have found it and possibly used it to do something good sparked curiosity in Rodrigo. He wanted to understand what it meant to live outside the comfort bubble he had always been in. Rodrigo decided he needed to find that child. He was determined to do something meaningful, something that could give his life purpose. Accompanied by a friend, Lucas, who always supported him, Rodrigo began to search for information about the card and the possibility of finding the girl who had returned it. Lucas, on the other hand, was skeptical. He didn't understand why Rodrigo was so obsessed with a homeless child. She probably just wanted to use the card, like anyone would, Lucas said. But Rodrigo didn't let his friend's words shake him. Rodrigo's search led him to a poorer neighborhood in the city, and the sight of that reality deeply shocked him. He wasn't prepared to see children like Emily, struggling for a piece of bread or a warm place to sleep. Rodrigo began to question his own beliefs and wondered if he really knew what life was like. He was so used to having everything he wanted that he had never stopped to think about those who had nothing. Meanwhile, Emily was facing new challenges. With each passing day, she felt more tired and disheartened. The relentless struggle for survival was wearing her down, and the pressure to take care of her father weighed heavily on her small shoulders. One night, after an especially difficult day, she sat on a park bench and cried. It was a scene she didn't want to show her father, but the pain and loneliness were unbearable. Sadness enveloped her, and she began to wonder if everything her father had taught her really made sense. What if I'm just dreaming? She thought. The connection between Emily and Rodrigo seemed, at first glance, unlikely, but as each faced their difficulties, life was about to intertwine their fates in unexpected ways. The path they were both on would lead them to learn valuable lessons about empathy, friendship, and overcoming adversity. Each, in their own way, was about to discover that the greatest riches were not material, but rather the human connections that could be formed, even in the most difficult circumstances. Emily's life continued to be an unending challenge. Each day, as she collected cans and bottles, the weight of responsibility seemed to grow. The scarcity of food became a constant shadow, and with each meal they couldn't make, the anguish intensified. David, her father, tried to keep hope alive, but reality was slowly consuming him. He couldn't find work, and frustration manifested in his tired eyes. Emily, noticing her father's struggle, decided she needed to do more. On a cold morning, she woke up before the sun rose, determined to find more cans. With frozen hands, she explored the alleys and sidewalks, but the amount of trash seemed to dwindle. Time passed, and with it, her energy. After hours of searching, she only managed to gather a few bottles. Physical exhaustion turned into emotional discouragement, and she wondered if all the effort was worth it. However, the memory of her father's words pushed her to keep going. Honesty is our greatest wealth. Meanwhile, Rodrigo was fighting his own internal battle. The search for Emily was taking him to a world he had never seen. Every corner he turned, every face he saw, was a reminder of the inequality that existed around him. He felt guilty for growing up in such a privileged home while other children struggled to survive. The pressure to find Emily was becoming an obsession, but also an opportunity to change his life. He wanted to understand the pain of people who had always been on the margins of his reality. Rodrigo and Lucas continued to explore the neighborhood where they believed Emily might be. With each new encounter, Rodrigo felt increasingly anxious and frustrated. Lucas, on the other hand, was becoming more and more skeptical. It doesn't make sense to look for a child who probably just wanted the card for herself. We should focus on more important things, he would say. This kind of comment made Rodrigo feel alone in his struggle. He didn't want to give up, but the pressure from friends and society made him question his own motivations. On a chilly afternoon, while Emily was trying to get a small snack at a bakery that accepted donations, she had an unexpected encounter. A group of young people was watching her, laughing and making hurtful comments. "Look at the homeless girl. She must be thinking she'll get rich with those cans," one of them said. Emily's heart raced with shame and anger. She wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come out. Instead, she turned and ran away, tears streaming down her face. The pain of humiliation hit her like a sharp blade. She felt invisible, and loneliness wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. Rodrigo, for his part, was facing his own moment of weakness. In a conversation with Lucas, he began to question his own purpose. And what if I don't find Emily? What if she isn't as special as I imagine? Lucas looked at him with an expression of understanding but also concern. "Maybe you're getting carried away by an illusion. Don't forget that you have your own life to live." These words echoed in Rodrigo's mind, intensifying his insecurity. He didn't want to be just a rich kid helping out of charity. He wanted to be someone who made a difference. That night, as Emily curled up under a thin blanket in a dark corner of a park, she reflected on her life. The pressure was becoming unbearable. "Why can't I just be normal?" she thought. She wanted the security of a home, the certainty of a warm meal, and above all, the love and support of her father. The absence of a clear future terrified her. And amidst the storm of emotions, the idea of using the lost credit card became an increasingly strong temptation. Meanwhile, Rodrigo decided he could wait no longer. He needed to act. With his heart racing, he stepped away from Lucas, determined to explore the streets alone. He wanted to understand the lives of those struggling children and, who knows, maybe find Emily. Each step he took was a mix of anxiety and determination. As he walked down a dark alley, he saw a young woman leaning against a wall, and his heart raced. Could it be her? But as he got closer, he realized it wasn't. The disappointment hit him like a blow, but he couldn't give up. It was time to confront his own vulnerability and, perhaps, find a genuine connection with someone who truly needed him. The journey of both young people was just beginning, and the challenges they faced would shape them in ways they could not yet imagine. The road ahead was filled with obstacles but also opportunities for growth and transformation. Emily and Rodrigo's lives were moving in opposite directions, but their stories were about to intertwine in an unexpected way. That cold night, as Emily huddled under her blanket, an idea formed in her mind. The lost credit card could be her way out. She knew it wasn't right, but the temptation to use that card to get food and a safe place to sleep was almost irresistible. The pressure of survival was greater than any principle she tried to uphold. Meanwhile, Rodrigo, in his solitary search, decided to visit a shelter he had heard about. He wanted to see what life was like for the people who took refuge there and, perhaps, find some clue about Emily. Upon entering the shelter, he was greeted by a strong smell of food and a murmur of conversations. He observed the people, each with their own stories of struggle and overcoming. But the image of Emily wouldn't leave his mind. The thought of finding her there, among those tired faces, filled him with a mix of hope and despair. It was then that an older man, who seemed to have lived through many hardships, approached Rodrigo. He had a wise look and a warm smile. "What brings a boy like you to a place like this?" he asked. Rodrigo hesitated but decided to share his search for Emily. The man listened intently and at the end said, "Sometimes the search is more about what we find in ourselves than about what we seek in others. You may be trying to save someone, but maybe you need to save yourself first." These words penetrated deep into Rodrigo's heart. He realized that his search for Emily had become a way to escape his own insecurities. He wanted to make a difference, but he was so focused on finding someone that he forgot to look at himself. Tears threatened to slip down his face, but he held them back, embarrassed. Deep down, he knew he had much to learn about empathy and solidarity. Meanwhile, Emily was making a decision. With her heart racing, she stood up and went to the spot where she had seen the credit card. Each step she took was a mix of anxiety and determination. When she arrived at the place, she picked up the card and, with trembling hands, looked at it. The idea of using it to buy food was tempting, but at the same time, something inside her made her hesitate. What if someone finds out? What if this just brings more problems? She thought. At that moment, A small child appeared, with a hungry and sad look. She was no more than 6 years old and was alone, staring at the trash searching for something to eat. Emily's heart ached. She couldn't ignore that scene. The idea of using the card began to seem not only wrong but selfish. If she had the courage to help that child, maybe she could find a greater purpose amid all the pain she felt. With a new focus, Emily decided she wouldn't use the card. Instead, she looked for a way to get food honestly. With the help of a group of volunteers working at the shelter, she began to understand more about how donations were made and how she could be part of the solution, not the problem. After his conversation with the older man, Rodrigo felt a surge of action. He decided that not only would he search for Emily, but he would also become a volunteer at the shelter. He wanted to help those going through difficulties and, who knows, find some information about the girl who intrigued him so much. With each passing minute there, he felt he was learning more about life and its complexities. The change in the trajectory of both young people was just beginning. By deciding to help the child, Emily felt a new sense of purpose. She realized that even amid despair, there was still room for kindness and compassion. Rodrigo, in turn, was learning that true wealth was not in money or status, but in the connections formed with the people around him. When they finally met at the shelter, both were different. Emily's gaze carried a weight of responsibility, but also a glimmer of hope. Rodrigo, for his part, had a deeper understanding of what it meant to be supportive. They didn't know it, but at that moment their lives were about to change forever, not just because of their individual quests, but because together they could find the strength to overcome the challenges surrounding them. Emily and Rodrigo's lives had changed in unexpected ways, and the shelter had become a space where their journeys could intertwine. In that environment, Emily felt a new purpose in helping the volunteers. She dedicated herself to serving meals, organizing donations, and even playing with the children who were there. Each smile she received in return, each murmured thank you, made her feel a little lighter, as if the shadows of her previous life were dissipating, even if only temporarily. Rodrigo, in turn, was enchanted by the collective energy of the shelter. He joined the other volunteers, helping to prepare meals and distribute blankets. With each new interaction, he felt he was part of something bigger. The conversation with the older man echoed in his mind, and he wondered if he was truly saving himself by helping others. This brought him a new understanding of himself and his motivations. However, there was an unease within him. What would happen if he didn't find Emily? The uncertainty followed him like a shadow, but he forced himself to believe that, regardless of the outcome, his contribution was valid. Weeks passed, and the routine at the shelter began to solidify. Emily and Rodrigo had not yet met, but their presences were felt. However, new obstacles began to arise. For Emily, the internal struggle was constant. She questioned whether she was doing enough. Even while helping the children and the volunteers, she still felt an emptiness inside. The memory of her old life, filled with insecurities and frustrations, still haunted her. No matter how much she tried to focus on the present, the past wouldn't leave her in peace. Rodrigo faced his own set of challenges. Although he felt fulfilled by helping, there were moments when despair overtook him. He couldn't stop thinking about Emily and how the search for her seemed further away. Sometimes, he found himself staring at the shelter's door, wondering if she would walk in at any moment. This expectation made him feel anxious, a mix of hope and fear. What would he say to her? How would she react? One night, while organizing some donated clothes, Emily found an old letter in one of the pockets. It was a letter from her mother, full of advice and love. As she read it, tears streamed down her face. The words were like a comforting hug, and she remembered who she truly was. That dreamer girl, full of hopes, seemed to have disappeared. But now, at the shelter, while helping those in need, she began to rediscover herself. The letter made her realize that, even in difficulties, there would always be a light to guide her, that she was not alone. Rodrigo also had a moment of reflection. After a tiring day of work at the shelter, he sat in a corner, observing the people around him. The stories of struggle and resilience deeply touched him. He realized that everyone there had their own battles, and life was not just about finding someone, but about connecting with others and understanding their pains. This epiphany helped him take a step toward his own emotional growth. He began to understand that if he wanted to find Emily, he would have to be more prepared to face his own vulnerabilities. Life went on, and the two young people, even without knowing each other yet, were on a path of transformation. Emily began to open up more with the volunteers, sharing her experiences. One of them, a woman named Laura, noticed Emily's internal struggle and decided to be a friend and mentor. They started talking about dreams and fears. Laura helped Emily see that the kindness she was offering to others was also a way to heal herself. Over time, Emily began to feel stronger and more confident. Rodrigo, for his part, started engaging in conversations with the shelter's residents. He listened to their stories, learned the importance of empathy and mutual support. A man named Carlos, who had gone through similar experiences, became a friend to Rodrigo. They talked about the difficulties they faced and how friendship was vital for overcoming them. As he opened up about his feelings for Emily, Carlos encouraged him not to give up on the search, but also to value what he had found along the way. In this new world they inhabited, both Emily and Rodrigo were learning that life was made of ups and downs, but that mutual support and solidarity could illuminate even the darkest days. The connection they were forming with the people around them began to fill the voids they felt, and amid all this, fate still held surprises that would change their lives forever. Emily and Rodrigo were at a moment in their lives that challenged everything they knew. The routine at the shelter had become a refuge, but also an internal battleground. Emily, while engaging in activities, faced the specter of the past, which followed her like a shadow. The weight of her insecurities and fears felt almost unbearable. However, by helping the children and listening to others' stories, she began to realize that the kindness she offered them was also a way to heal herself. One day, while serving soup, a small girl with bright eyes smiled at her. That simple expression brought a warmth that made her feel that perhaps there was still hope for her. Rodrigo, on the other hand, was battling the fear of loneliness. The search for Emily had become both a burden and a motivation. He felt lost among so many people, but the friendship he began to cultivate with Carlos brought a new light to his life. During a conversation, Carlos shared his own experiences of loss and starting over, and Rodrigo realized he was not alone in his struggles. This new connection encouraged him to look inside himself and accept that he needed to confront his own insecurities before feeling complete next to someone. The conversations with Laura also deeply impacted Emily. As time passed, she began to open her heart and share her stories. Laura, with her wisdom, helped her understand that accepting help was not a sign of weakness, but of strength. And so, Emily began to trust herself more. Each time she allowed herself to feel a little joy, even if fleeting, it was as if a layer of weight was lifted from her shoulders. One night, while organizing donations, Emily found an old toy, a teddy bear that had belonged to her as a child. Holding it, the memories of happy moments surfaced, and she understood that there was still a part of her that wanted to dream and believe. That bear became a symbol of her journey back to herself. With a new understanding, she decided that she would no longer cling to the past, but rather learn from it. Inspired by the life stories he heard, Rodrigo began to reflect on what success really meant. He realized that for a long time, he had measured his worth in terms of material achievements, but now he understood that true success lay in the connections he created and the lives he touched. This shift in perspective led him to engage more with the shelter residents, listening to their stories and learning from their struggles. He began to apply these lessons in his own life, seeking to connect with others in a deeper way. Weeks passed, and as the shelter became a temporary home for both of them, the friendships they formed there offered them a new understanding of life. Emily and Rodrigo, even without knowing each other, were on a path of transformation. The challenges they faced became opportunities to grow and become stronger, more resilient people. One day, while helping to prepare a big dinner at the shelter, Emily saw Rodrigo for the first time. He was talking with Carlos, laughing at a joke he had told. Her heart skipped a beat as she noticed the genuine connection he had with others. At the same time, Rodrigo felt a wave of recognition upon seeing Emily, a presence that seemed to illuminate him in an inexplicable way. Their eyes met for a brief moment, but the impact was profound. In that instant, both felt that their journeys were about to intertwine in a way they had never imagined. The lessons they had learned, the friendships they had formed, and the strength they discovered within themselves were about to guide them into a new chapter in their lives. And so, with a new understanding of themselves and what truly mattered, they were ready to face whatever destiny had in store for them. Emily was organizing the last donation of the day at the shelter when she felt a flutter in her stomach. The night of the big dinner was approaching, and she knew it would be more than just a meal. It was an opportunity to bring everyone together and celebrate the small victories they had achieved. However, anxiety consumed her. What if something went wrong? What if no one showed up? These questions echoed in her mind, causing her insecurities to resurface with full force. Rodrigo, on the other hand, was in his own dilemma. He had been invited to share a story during the dinner, something that made him nervous. The memories of his failures and the loneliness he felt were still fresh, and he feared that by exposing himself, he might be judged. The thought of standing in front of so many people, telling his story, felt unbearable. However, he also knew that this was a crucial moment to connect with others and show his vulnerability. As the dinner hour approached, Emily and Rodrigo prepared to face their fears. In a corner of the shelter, Emily spotted Rodrigo, who was rehearsing some words softly. She felt an urge to approach him but hesitated. Rodrigo's gaze, lost in thought, reflected the internal struggle they both faced. Deep down, she knew he was also battling his own insecurities. When the dinner began, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The tables were simply decorated but with a warmth that shone through. The children ran back and forth while the adults exchanged nervous smiles. Looking at all those faces, Emily realized she was not alone. Each person there carried their own stories, their pains, and their hopes. The sense of unity began to warm her heart. Rodrigo sat at one of the tables, observing the interactions among everyone. He felt the weight of Carlos's gaze on him, like a silent encouragement. "You can do it," Carlos thought, with an encouraging smile. Rodrigo took a deep breath, recalling the conversations he had with Carlos and how each shared story had helped him feel more complete. He decided that, in that moment, he would not hide. When it was his turn to speak, Rodrigo stood up, his voice trembling slightly. He looked at the children first and saw their curious, hopeful eyes. "I am Rodrigo," he began, "and I have a story to tell." He shared his experiences of loss, loneliness, and the relentless search for meaning. Upon opening her heart, she felt a heavy burden being lifted from her shoulders. Emily, watching Rodrigo, felt an urge to stand up as well. She realized that this was the moment she had been waiting for to free herself from the past. With a nervous smile, she joined him, acknowledging that their stories, though different, were interconnected. "I am Emily," she said, "and I also have my fears." As she shared her insecurities and how she had learned to find hope in the little things, she saw the faces in front of her light up. The tension in the air dissipated as the stories began to flow. The other shelter residents also started to share, one after another, their own experiences. Dinner became a space of genuine connection, where everyone found the courage to expose themselves and support one another. Laughter and tears mingled, creating a bond that united everyone present. Emily and Rodrigo exchanged glances, and a mutual understanding was born between them. In that moment of vulnerability, they both realized that true strength was not in hiding, but in allowing themselves to be seen and supported. The words of Rodrigo and Emily echoed not only as accounts of their lives, but as a reminder that life is made up of new beginnings. They understood that although they had failed on various occasions, that did not define who they were. What truly mattered was the path they were walking together. When dinner came to an end, everyone was emotional and grateful. Emily and Rodrigo, now more connected than ever, knew they had left their insecurities behind, making room for friendship and mutual support. That night would become a milestone in their lives, a reminder that true transformation occurs when one allows themselves to be vulnerable and connects with others. As the shelter residents began to disperse, Emily and Rodrigo exchanged a smile, feeling they had taken an important step in their journeys. The future was still uncertain, but now, together, they felt ready to face whatever came their way, confident that they would no longer be alone. After the emotional dinner, the atmosphere in the shelter was charged with a new energy. Emily and Rodrigo, still wrapped in the feeling of belonging, sat together at one of the tables while the other shelter residents began to clean and organize the space. The connection between them was palpable, and the insecurity that had once dominated them now gave way to a feeling of hope. "I didn't know I could feel this way," Rodrigo said, his voice soft, yet filled with emotion. "It was as if by sharing my story I had freed something inside me." He looked at Emily, who nodded, fully understanding what he felt. For her, that moment had been a turning point. "I also felt taken to a place I didn't expect," Emily replied, a slight smile on her lips. "It's as if we are all one, united by our struggles and victories." As they helped tidy up, a group of children approached, still buzzing from the magical night they had experienced. One of them, a little curly-haired girl named Sophia, took Emily's hand. "You were very brave to tell your story," she said, awestruck. Emily felt her heart warm. "Thank you, Sophia. You were also very brave for listening. Each of us has an important story." The girl's gaze sparkled with understanding, making Emily feel even more fulfilled. Rodrigo, watching the interaction, remembered how his insecurities had almost prevented him from stepping onto the stage. He realized that by telling his story, he had not only helped himself but had also inspired those around him. "It's amazing how our words can touch people's lives," he commented, looking at the children. "Sometimes we think we aren't important, but each of us has something to offer." Emily agreed and added, "And every word we share can help someone feel less alone." With the shelter almost in order, conversations flowed. More residents joined them, and the group formed a support circle. There were laughter and tears, and everyone began to share small pieces of their stories, weaving a web of empathy. Trust grew, and the old feeling of loneliness that had once hung over the shelter seemed to dissipate like fog at dawn. Carlos, who had been a supportive figure for Rodrigo, approached and said, "I saw the change in both of you tonight. The courage to open up is something rare, and you inspired all of us." Rodrigo smiled, feeling grateful for the support. "We couldn't have done it without you, Carlos. You've always been there to encourage us." Emily spoke up too. "And now, we want to be there for each other." The idea of creating a support group in the shelter began to take shape, a space where everyone could gather, share their stories, and help one another. That night, as the shelter prepared to sleep, Emily and Rodrigo felt they had taken an important step. The vulnerability that both had chosen to show had not only united them, but had also created a new bond among all the residents. They were ready to face their challenges, now with a new understanding that they were not alone. Rodrigo looked at Emily, who was still full of energy and enthusiasm. "Do you think we can do this again?" he asked, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Of course," she replied. "But next time, maybe we can invite more people. I believe there are many untold stories around here." The idea of expanding that safe space made Rodrigo's heart race. The future seemed promising. That night was not just a dinner, it was the beginning of a new journey. Emily and Rodrigo realized that by opening up, they had created a space for others to feel comfortable doing the same. The transformation they were experiencing was not just personal, but collective. And so, with a new purpose, they prepared to face tomorrow together, ready to build a shelter that was not only physical, but emotional, where stories could be shared and lives transformed. On that magical night, the shelter became a home of stories and emotions. Emily and Rodrigo, now more than friends, felt they had created a safe space for everyone's voices to be heard. As the group dispersed to their beds, the feeling of community and belonging still lingered in the air. Each of them had opened up in a way they never thought possible, and that made them stronger. Rodrigo reflected on his journey. That young man who used to feel insecure and invisible was now a beacon of hope for others. He realized that by sharing his story, he not only freed himself from his fears but also ignited a flame of courage in the hearts of those around him. The connection he felt with Emily and the other residents was a powerful reminder that vulnerability is, in fact, a strength. His transformation was evident. He was no longer a spectator of his own life, but an active protagonist, willing to face new challenges. Emily, in turn, felt more confident than ever. Looking back, she saw how her initial hesitation had dissipated. That dinner, which started as a moment of uncertainty, became a landmark in her life. The stories they shared were not just about pain and struggle, but about overcoming and hope. She realized that everyone had something to offer, and that inspired her to continue the journey of empathy and support. The idea of creating a support group was not just a proposal but a mission that pulsed within her. Emily knew that by helping others, she was also helping herself. In the days that followed, the shelter came to life. The support group that Emily and Rodrigo envisioned began to meet regularly, and each gathering brought new stories and new friendships. Just the act of listening and being heard made an immense difference. That exchange of experiences not only strengthened the bonds between the residents but also brought a new perspective on life. They learned that together, they could face challenges that once seemed insurmountable. The transformation of the shelter did not go unnoticed. Carlos Cas, who had been a figure of support, saw how the energy of the place had changed. The atmosphere of sadness and loneliness was replaced by laughter and hope. The shelter, which had once been just a temporary refuge, became a home where stories were valued and people felt respected and loved. Looking to the future, Rodrigo and Emily were full of plans. They dreamed of expanding the support group, inviting more people to join them. The idea of creating a monthly event where everyone could share their stories and celebrate their achievements was a desire that burned in their hearts. They understood that true wealth was not in material possessions, but in the connections they formed and the lives they touched. Emily and Rodrigo's journey was a powerful reminder that each of us has a story to tell, and that these stories can be the key to transformation. They discovered that by opening up, they not only changed their own destinies but also impacted the lives of many around them. Now, they invite you to reflect. What is your story? How can you open up and inspire others? Share your experiences in the comments and engage in the support network. Every voice matters, and together we can create a space where everyone feels welcomed. Don't wait. The time to act is now. Like and subscribe to continue receiving stories that touch the heart and transform lives. What was the moment that touched your heart the most or left you speechless? We really want to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and share your reflections with us. Your insight is essential to us and helps us spread inspiring stories that are even more engaging. If you know someone who might be excited about this story, don't hesitate to share the video with them. Let's spread moments that inspire and touch the heart together. And if you're eager for more narratives that capture the essence of life and emotion, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our upcoming exciting adventures. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like. I would love to read your thoughts on the story in the comments. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next exciting story.